Got the camera back.
Gives me goals,
Quick
you know.
stuff.
I like to have the goals.
All right, so for the next couple of weeks, because we're in the 7 weeks now between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays, we're going to study material that's appropriate to the coming high holidays. And first, I'm just going to share with you some very interesting passages from the Talmud that I studied this summer. So I'm just going to give you some, share with you some of the insights that are not mine, actually. But
Are these the...
yeah, so you should pass them around. And I think beginning next week, assuming that the book comes in time, I ordered the book, the Tractate Rosh Hashanah, which you can probably guess what the subject is. So that's the Talmud Tractate Rosh Hashanah. So, although you'd be surprised, I mean, they switch the subjects so frequently that it goes off all over the place. So there'll be some interesting material in there. But for now, we're going to look at these two, and I'm actually going to do it in reverse order. So if you take this and turn it, we'll go to the second page. So where it says Erev Yom Kippur in Sirah, although it's actually Surah. You see that? What's it? E? Okay. You have the English afterwards. I'm going to read the Hebrew. This has nothing to do with Hamas, missiles, ceasefires, I imagine. And I don't even know how you would connect this material. I decided we can finally kind of look at other things. I find this to be a really, really interesting story. And what's fascinating about the story, and you'll have to sort of pay attention, I'm kind of giving things away a little bit, but the story is definitely not about what it seems to be about. I guess that's how I'll clue you in the beginning. See if you can figure out what it's really about. And I'm quite sure the author of the story intentionally plays this game with us to try to throw us off the mark to see if we can actually figure out what's going on in the story. Okay? That's enough of the. All right. So you can follow in Hebrew or English. I'll be translating. So, but I'm just going to read in the Hebrew. Besura lo achlu kachel bepumpadita achlu kachel. Okay. So first of all, two major Jewish centers in Babylonia, Sura and Pumbedita, like a lot of different Jewish centers, kind of competing, both thinking that they're the top and the best. And I guess I don't really know what to compare it to nowadays. New York and Los Angeles, what's the most important Jewish community? And there's competition sometimes. So Sura and Pumbedita, certainly a friendly competition, but also important to keep in mind, like many major Jewish communities, had different customs, different laws. And one of their most important, I shouldn't say that. One of their differences in custom was in eating a cow's, how does he translate this? Udder. One would allow it. So in Surah, they didn't allow it, and in Pumbedita, they allowed it. Okay. And you can see why a cow's udder would be a confusing thing for Jews, because, milk comes out of it. So, of course, you can't eat it. It's milk and meat. At the same time, it's part of a cow, and, and as long as you get rid of the milk. And so, anyhow, so there's a disagreement. So in Surah, the law was it was not kosher, and in Pumbedita, the law was that it was kosher, but it actually doesn't even say it that way. It says Pumbedita achlu, they ate them. They ate them. It was like eating tongue. Also, something that, just for purposes of taste, never made any sense to me. How can anybody eat tongue? But some people do, right? And it's kosher, so people eat it, people don't. So in Pumbedita, they would eat it. All right, so that introduces us. Rami bar Tamri. Who Rami bar Dikoli? Okay, so this is a story about Rami bar Tamri, not a rabbi, because otherwise we would call him rabbi, but he's not a rabbi. His name was also Rami bar Dikoli. Mi Pumbedita. He was from Pumbedita. Nizdamein l'Sura, came over to Surah, be'erev Yom Kippurim. So he arrived in Surah. Now it says Erev Yom Kippur, but what that really means is the day before Yom Kippur. It doesn't mean in the evening. Erev in our language is evening, but Erev Yom Kippur, just like in Hebrew, Erev Shabbat doesn't mean Friday night. Erev Shabbat means Friday. The whole day is the eve of Sabbath. So obviously he didn't come there on the eve of Yom Kippur and just show up, because he can't. Then you'd have to go to shul and get ready. So he came on the day before Yom Kippur, the day. Okay, that night is the Kol Nidre service. He came there that day. So what do you have to do that day? What do we do that day?
Get ready.
Well, one thing for sure you have to do is get a meal together, because you're going to be fasting for it. Right. Okay. Yeah. And then other things you got to do, clean clothes, whatever you have to do. So that's what he does. And the point is he's got time to do it. He doesn't just show up at night. Okay. Hotziu toshavei Pumbedita kachalim shelahem bezarkum. So the people of Pumbedita gathered together their udders because they had, slaughtered cows because they were going to have meals together, communal meals, and they threw the udders away. So why did they throw the udders away? Because you can't eat them. Logical. So they had garbage dumps, so they threw them in the garbage. Halachu unetalam va'achlam. But he, who was from Pumbedita, he gathered them and he ate some of them. I don't know if he ate all 200 of them, but he ate some of them. That was his meal. He ate them. Okay. Heviu lifnei Rav Chisda. They brought him in front of Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda was the rabbinic authority, which is saying a lot because Pumbedita had lots of scholars, but Rav Chisda was in charge. And apparently this was like a heavily Jewish town. So they brought him in a kind of pseudo court, like a Jewish court, because they saw him. They witnessed him breaking Jewish law, at least Jewish law according to their interpretation. So they brought him to Rav Chisda, and it's a kind of inquiry. Amar lo, mipnei ma'asita kach, and just says, why did you do that? Not kosher. Okay. Amar lo, mimkomo sharav Yehuda ani she'ochel. And it says, he actually doesn't say I come from Pumbedita, but he says, I come from, I'm sorry, so this takes place in Surah. I misspoke earlier. It doesn't really matter. I get them mixed up. It's like mince and Pinsk, and really Galicianer, and I mean it's another one of these classic Jewish stories about feuds between places. All cultures have that too, right? The Hatfields and the McCoys, right? So this is one of the classic stories about this feud. But he doesn't say that I come from Pumbedita. He says that I am from the place of Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda holds sway. Rav Yehuda is the Rav Chisda of Pumbedita, so I'm from the place of Rav Yehuda. He doesn't say I'm from Pumbedita, but I'm from the place of Rav Yehuda, and he eats it. Okay, with that's what we do in my hometown. That's our custom. Okay, is that a good answer?
Should be.
Yeah, I mean they may not like it because they've got this feud, but we do have this minhag hamakom. Minhag hamakom is you follow the minhag, the custom of the place, yeah. So, and that's the place, and Rav Yehuda is a rabbi. We're not questioning. We're not saying that's not Judaism. Judaism is different locations and different customs. Okay. Amarlo. Ve'en lecha notnim alav chamrei makom sheyatsa misham v'chamrei makom she'alach l'sham. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. All right. I'll read it again. Amarlo. So then now they say to him. Ein lecha notnim alav chamrei makom sheyatsa misham v'chamrei makom she'alach l'sham. So they go back and they say, well, wait a second. It's minhag hamakom. I mean, yeah, you're from the place of Rav Yehuda, but here we don't eat it, and you came and you joined us, so you shouldn't have eaten it here. That was. I mean, I understand that you've got different customs back in the primitive Pumbedita where you come from, but here we're stricter and we don't eat it, and you're here. Okay, and that's a good response. Because that's a halachic principle. Right. You are here. Okay. So he answers, Amarlo, he said to him, Chutz litchom achaltim. He said, well, I ate them outside of the border of the city. I was very careful. You throw your garbage outside the border of the city, and that's where I ate it. So he's got a response. Good response. It is a good response, too, by the way. Okay, so minhag makom. So what's the makom? The makom. So I was outside of the makom. I was outside of your tchum, so I was able to do it. Okay. Amarlo, uvamatzalita otam. Well, how did you cook them? Okay, so you want to make sure that I want to make sure you cook them correctly because there are halachic ways of cooking. There's proper ways of cooking and improper ways of cooking. And he said, b'chartzanim, I use these little grape vines to cook them. I roasted them using different grapevines. V'shema miyayin nesachu. Aha, grapevines. So if they were grapevines, maybe they were used for idolatrous purposes. We can't just eat any grapes. We can't just have wine. It has to be kosher wine. Maybe they weren't. Maybe you cooked them with non-kosher grapevines because there's non-Jews around here, and maybe they used some of those grapes for idolatrous purposes, and that would make the whole thing illegitimate, unkosher. Okay. Amarlo lachar 12 chodesh hayu. Says I made sure that those things were more than a year old. And once something's more than a year old, even if it was just he knows his stuff. Right? So it's an halachic response. He says, I knew they were older than a year, and as long as they're older than a year, how does he know that? I don't know, dude. DNA dating, I'm not sure how he knows that. But let's say that he has a good way of knowing, and as long as they're older than a year, then the whole business about idolatrous purposes doesn't hold. I'm allowed to use them. Okay. V'shema gezel hayu. Well, maybe they were stolen. Maybe those grapevines were stolen. We know the udders weren't stolen, because people throw away the udders, but maybe those grapevines, people can use them. How do you know they weren't stolen? He keeps on digging to find some halachic impropriety. Okay, but he goes, Amar lo, lachar yeush ba'alim hayu, she'alu avesh. And he says, I could tell by looking at them that the owners would have despaired of ever getting them back. This is a halachic category, which is clear, although there's some subtleties in it, but it's called yeush. Yeush means despair, and it has to do with finding lost objects. We've had this before. Yeah, we've had it before. Right. So if you find something and you can assert and pretty much assume that the owner has given up, has despaired of getting it back, then you're allowed to keep it. So he says, these branches, they were so mushed up, and there was no way that the owner was ever going to come and recollect them. And probably they were scattered, and he knows his stuff. He says, I could tell that these were yeush. The owner would despair of those. They're hefker. So they were just abandoned. That's why I was able to use them. Yeah. Ra'ah, now he's got another way. Ra'ah she'eno manich tefillin. He sees he's not wearing tefillin. All right, now, so you have to understand, in Surah, they wear tefillin all day long. Yeah, like the Vilna Gaon wore tefillin all day long. Like the last Jew on earth to wear tefillin all day long was the Vilna Gaon. But there was a place, there was a period where many Jews wore tefillin all day long. And then they look at this guy and say, hey, you're not wearing tefillin. So they've given up on the eating non-kosher, eating stolen stuff. But that's fine. Yeah, so there's something else. Like you're not wearing tefillin. Let me stop for a second. We probably won't have time to go into all the depth of this. Maybe I'll go back next. We'll continue next week. But other than being a nudnik, can you understand what Rav Chista's doing? And maybe you can share it. There is something where he's not a total idiot here. He sounds like a nudnik. He's trying to find just some halachic violation. But can you at least defend his behavior at all? Explain his behavior?
He's trying to keep his community pure.
Yes, he's trying to keep his community pure. What day is it? Erev Yom Kippur. So that might be more important because it's Erev Yom Kippur. So what do we do on Kol Nidre night? Yeah, that's when we start forgiving, but it's communal forgiveness, right? It is. It's called. Everything is phrased in the plural, and we want to make sure our whole community is pure before God. And now he's got this outsider, and we want to just make sure. And anybody, I don't know, this is interesting because we chanted very nicely, but we often don't pay attention to the first several words. But does anybody remember the first several words the Chazan chants before chanting Kol Nidre?
Yeah,
you should know this. B'yeshiva. And then what's next? So B'shiva Shamala, B'shiva Shamata in the upper courts and in the lower courts, meaning in heaven and here. Now what?
Was it Al Bar HaMakom?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So for God and for the community. Yes. And now what's next?
Anu mitpalelin. We were praying.
Yes. Im. Avaryanim. Yes. Yeah. We ask permission from the upper court to pray together with sinners. Right? Because we're all there together. Some of us are sinners, and so we want a pure atmosphere. Now, in some ways, you should think about this. In some ways, what we're claiming is that will help me reach my own sense of oneness with God. If I look around me and I think, oh, that guy over there, he's a thief, that's going to distract me, and it's going to make me think, we want God to forgive all of us. And if I have the sense that there are sinners around, that may distract from my own purity, my own reaching for purity. So Rav Chista is trying to, he feels like psychologically it's of a benefit to his community if we can make sure, well, at least today we're all in it together and we're all trying to be as pure as possible. Now he's got this outsider coming from Pumbedita and he's just wondering about him.
But the prelude to Kol Nidre is Anu mitpalelin im ha'avaryanim. We are praying with those who are
yes,
sinners.
right,
so
right.
It doesn't fit.
Yes, because the statement itself reveals a certain insecurity. Like we need permission. We need permission to pray with these sinners, because otherwise, that's part of like psychologically opening our hearts to people around us that may be sinners. Otherwise, like Rav Chista, we may feel like I just want to be with people that are like me, and I just want for this Yom Kippur. Otherwise I can have my open heart, but for this Yom Kippur, I just want to be with people that share my assumptions and that are at least trying. So, and Rav Chisda is trying to create that mood in his community. You may approve or not approve, but that's at least partially explains what he's doing. And it'll explain something that happens at the end of the story, too. So I'm going to keep going. All right. Ra'ashe no manich tefillin. So, and he asked him, Amar mipnei lo anachta tefillin. Why aren't you wearing tefillin? Amar lo chole mayim hayiti. So he says, I have a digestive disorder. And you actually aren't, well, Amar Rav Yehuda. He quotes his rabbi. Chole mayim patur me'tefillin. If you have a digestive issue, you you don't have to wear tefillin. Patur means you're exempt. It's not like you don't have to. But
why specifically digestive disorder?
Because of gas. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. But yeah, because of gas, and then if you're having gas all the time, it's maybe considered inappropriate to put on tefillin. It would interfere with the kind of the purity of the, So I want to just throw something in that and here I'm giving away part of it, but there are just subtleties within subtleties in the story. Why does he have a digestive disorder?
Because he was eating the others.
He was just eating. What did he just eat? Yeah, he just ate a bunch of udders. Yeah. So that probably if that was your meal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and also
they've been discarded.
Yeah, they'd been discarded too. Right. So it's important. So we forget that detail because it goes into this kind of elaborate halakhic discourse. Mm-hmm. But it's important to remember how the story started. He ate 200, not 200, but he ate that was his meal. He ate a discarded udder. So he's got digestive disorder. What?
Even one udder.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me go on. Ra'ashe no matil tzitzit. He sees he's not wearing tzitzit either.
Oh.
Yeah. So he's not wearing, and the tzitzit you're supposed to wear all the time. So he says, Amarlo bimnei and lechatzitzi. Why aren't you wearing tzitzit? Amarlo talit she'ulahi. He says, so the garment I'm wearing. So the law of tzitzit in the Torah is that if you're wearing this four-cornered garment, now we purposely wear the four-cornered garment, right? But the law is, in those days, everybody wore the four-cornered garments. If you're wearing a four-cornered garment, then on the corners you have to add the fringes. So he says, the garment I'm wearing, talit she'ulahi, is borrowed. It's a borrowed garment. Ve'amar Rav Yehuda, and now I'm quoting Rav Yehuda, talit she'ulah, kol shloshim yom tura mitzitzit. And if you're wearing a borrowed garment, it's not yours. You don't own it. For 30 days, at least, you have a grace period where you don't have to wear tzitzit. So, I don't know if you know, so tzitzit the commandment for tzitzit are to put on clothes that you own. Okay, so if you don't own them, now after 30 days, they're basically yours. It means that you're wearing them and you've taken ownership. But if it's just for, a couple days, you don't have to wear tzitzit. Okay, so it's a back and forth. You've got all the answers. Turn the page. Oh, sorry.
We don't have to turn the page.
Yeah. No, if you're in English. Oh, yeah. It's in the bold at the top of the next page if you're following here. B'toch kach heviu adam echad she'eino mechabed aviv ve'imo. Kaftu. Okay, so in the middle of all this, that's how we know it's a kind of court setting. They brought in a guy who it doesn't say the details of it, but wasn't honoring his father and mother. And they were about to punish him for that.
And this is another
somebody else. So it's not the same guy. Yeah, it's not like they're accusing him suddenly, but you don't honor your father and mother. So this is a different guy. So that's how we know it's a kind of halachic court, and that they have some kind of enforcement mechanism. So they bring in a guy who's been accused, and maybe it's been proven that he hasn't honored his father and mother, and they're about to punish him for that. It's lashes, I think. Right? Yeah. So. Flogging him, yeah. Amar lehem Rami bar Tamri. So this guy from Pupatinta speaks up and says, Hanichuhu, let him go. Shishaninu. Now it's important also to understand, since it's Erev Yom Kippur, that's why they're so concerned. I'm not sure they would do this every day. Bring in a guy who is not honoring his father and mother and punish him for that. But because it's Erev Yom Kippur and they're going for this purity of community, on that day, they bring the guy in, they decide to punish him for it. Rami Bar Chami says, let him go. Shishaninu, because there's a law. There's a teaching. Kol mitzvot aseh, sheschara betzida, ein beit din shel mata, muzarin aleh. Any commandment where the reward and punishment are given alongside the commandment. Very few in the Torah, right? Mostly in the Torah, you just have the law itself, and you're not given the reward of the punishment. Right? I mean, we think of the Torah as being filled with punishments and rewards. In fact, it's not. There are very few of the 613 commandments where it actually says what's going to happen to you specifically if you do it or if you don't do it. So honoring parents, honoring father and mother happens to be one where it actually gives you the reward alongside it. Anybody remember what
Long life.
Long life, exactly. Okay. So he says we have a teaching that when the reward is told alongside it in the Torah, then we stay out of it. We don't punish anybody for that. That's the law. So this guy Rami from Pupadita, who is not a rabbi, is instructing Surah's rabbinical court, you are not allowed to punish this guy. So presumably they let him go. Amar la Rav Chisda, Ro'e'ani bekach shecharifa taharbe. So Rav Chisda says to him, I see that you're very sharp. And it's like he's saying, like, you're a wise guy. I see you're a wise guy. But there's like an admiration there. You seem to know all the answers. So Amar, and he is. He's a wise guy. He knows all the answers. There's not anything that he's stumped on, and he can justify his behavior across the board. Amar lo, ilu hayita bimkomo shel Rav Yehuda. If you were in the place of Rav Yehuda, now he's talking to Rav Chisda, so this is a very sharp thing to say. It's a very nervy thing to say, because Rav Chisda is the expert in his town. So he says, if you were in Rav Yehuda's town, Hayiti marecha charipati. I could really show you sharpness. then you'd really see. In other words, if you were a student of Rav Yehuda, the idea that Rav Chisda would be anybody's student is astonishing. But if you were a student of Rav Yehuda like me, then you could be as sharp as me. Okay, that's the end of the story. So let me. We got like 5 minutes, so not even that. So I may have to give some stuff away. What's the story about? What do you think? I mean, what's...
Challenging someone who appears to have violated certain rules.
Okay, so on the surface, it seems to be about halakha. The whole discourse of the story is halachic. Why aren't you doing this? Well, here's why. I've got this teaching. What about this teaching? So it seems like they're having a halachic debate. I think, in my opinion, that's the trickery of the storyteller. He's bringing you in and thinking, oh, this is an interesting halachic dispute. And you're following the halachic arguments back and forth. And in the misdirection, you're missing what the story is really about. And in that misdirection, then we're learning the lesson of the story. So what's the story really about?
Sharpening your wits. The whole idea of debating.
I mean, with all due respect,
Yeah.
you do not necessarily need smicha to have knowledge. But,
Yeah, so, well, who do you admire more in the story? Let's start with that. I mean, is there a good guy, a bad guy, neutral? What do you think? I mean,
everybody is defending his territory.
although you're suggesting that this Rami is in some ways one of the lessons of the story is you don't need to be a rabbi to know halakha, and it's sort of puncturing the Rav Chisda a little bit, like it's bringing him down to earth. By the end, you have him actually admitting that this guy who's not a rabbi from somebody else is sharp and knows something.
But he's being disrespectful in the community.
Right.
Who was being disrespectful? Rami, said Rami. Yeah. Although I will say that he's not the one that's hauled in for violating the halakha on the day before Yom Kippur.
Right.
So he may be disrespectful, but he's defending himself.
In the middle of the story, you change issues. All of a sudden, it's not about halakha anymore. It's about a bigger issue. Which is
What's the bigger issue?
That how you treat someone who's not honoring.
Although I would say that's in the line of the halachic argument. All right, so we've just got a few minutes, and to me, it's really interesting because I was definitely fooled too the first time I read it. I think everybody would be, but when you take away the veil from the story, it becomes a little clearer. It's about how you treat a stranger that's new in town. Now you have to take a look at this guy. Look at Rami. What's his meal?
He's very poor.
Where did he get his meal?
Outside the city.
The garbage. The garbage. A Jew comes into town on the day before Yom Kippur, and nobody invites him over for the meal. Seriously, and so do you think he wants to eat the cow's udder? It's in the garbage dump. Okay, and what's he wearing?
A borrowed
Borrowed. So it's clear he's in rags. He's a Jew that comes into town, and Rav Chisda is so concerned about halachic purity and the purity of his congregation, he's missing the most important ethical issue, which should be staring him in the face. And it's interesting. You see why he's missing it, because we missed it too. This is a stranger, a homeless guy, who's come into town the day before, and they're concerned about his tefillin. How come you're not wearing tefillin? Well, because they've got the big issue of communal purity to worry about. But you've got a homeless Jew in front of you, and what are you doing? And that's what the story is about. It's how easily during the high holidays you can get diverted into like the punctiliousness of halakha or caring about the purity of your community, and you start to worry and you start to forget about what this is about. Now, keep in mind, what's the Haftorah? I mean, this is so connected to the Haftorah on Yom Kippur. The Haftorah on Yom Kippur is precisely not Jonah. It's the one from Isaiah, where Isaiah says this fast means nothing. That's Isaiah's telling the congregation that the fast means nothing because on your way into shul you're ignoring these poor people. So the fast is zero. It's nothing. It nauseates. And God actually says it nauseates me what you're doing. So you're so focused on the punctiliousness and your own quest for purity, you're missing what the whole thing's about, which is to open your heart. It's to open your heart, and I think Rav Chisda gets that in the end. He starts to and then he says, you need to come to Surah because, you need to come to Pumbedita because in Pumbedita at least we have our priorities straight. We're not spending the day before Yom Kippur giving strangers the third degree.
And also, in addition to everything you were saying, not only do they not welcome him and invite him for a meal, but then they put him on a grill because his habit is from a different town.
Right.
They know that
Right.
in the other town it's different, so just let it go.
Right.
No, we're going to grill you. We're going to burn you on the stake.
Yeah.
Rabbi, speaking of Isaiah and Jeremiah, these guys existed in an environment of paganism.
Yeah.
The Jews themselves had reverted to paganism. They were more predominantly pagan and sinners than they were observers of the law. Would you say that's the case?
I don't think we really know that.
Well, look what he's saying. Isaiah is saying, you go to fast, but you're missing the whole point.
That doesn't make them idolaters, though.
No.
It just means it makes them missing the point,
What
which is pretty easy to. It's easy. I mean, you can get caught up in any kind of just ritual behavior and miss the larger point. So that's why why do we read the Isaiah Haftorah? To make sure that we don't do it. Although we still do, but I mean, that's the point of reading that Isaiah Haftorah, so you understand what the point is and you don't miss it.
It always makes me think of Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. When people say to me, so many people are misbehaving, I said, well, so what were the prophets are always arguing about? Because people haven't changed that much in behaviors. We have different challenges, but innately we have the same failings.
We do.
They must have been outstanding moralists. I'm not quite sure where they got